Across decades of live-action movies, we have seen the Dark Knight hold his own against iconic villains, and these are the only names that always dominate pop culture trends. But the headlines often don't give enough importance to other antagonists, who either hide in plain sight or are introduced with a lot of potential that is unfortunately never tapped into. You will find them buried under layers of misdirection and subtle dialogues, with only the most attentive viewers recognizing them. At other times, they are given some screen time, but then treated like afterthoughts in cameo roles. These villains deserve a lot more attention because, in a city like Gotham, evil does not always reveal itself with a maniacal laugh. Join me as I unearth some of the most underutilized and hidden antagonists that most of you might have missed out on.
Son of a bitch. Makes a connection with us.
Batman 1989. Carl Grissom. While this is an original character created for the film, Grissom is heavily based on the classic comic book mob figures Rupert Thorne and Carmine Falcone. He had most of the GCPD on his payroll and had a good relationship with Jack Napier, his right-hand man, until he found out that Napier was involved with his mistress, Alicia Hunt. This, combined with the fact that Napier was eyeing to take over his operation, made him devise a plot to assassinate the man for good. Once the ploy was revealed, Napier managed to survive despite falling into a vat of chemicals, and as you can probably guess, if you have not watched the film, turned into the Joker. He got his revenge on Grissom as well later in a supremely satisfying scene. Grissom is not a hidden villain in the movie since he was pretty much responsible for creating Joker, but in popular Batman live-action discourse, this film is often left out. That is why I included Grissom here, because let's face it, without him we would not have received the Joker. Jack Nicholson's portrayal of the character is one of my favorites because he often made me forget that the film was about Batman, not himself. Max Eckert. He was the corrupt police lieutenant on Carl Grissom's payroll and is also an original character made for the movie. A lot of fans believe that he acts as a stand-in for Harvey Bullock, who in the comics is sloppy but ultimately a good cop, or Arnold Flass, who is truly a corrupt officer. His loyalty was completely towards Grissom because he flat out discredited Jack Napier's intention to take over the business in the future. Despite being a crooked cop, he was still good at being a detective because he was the one who informed Grissom about Alicia and Napier hooking up behind his back. Alicia Hunt. She was a top fashion model who had appeared on the cover of Vogue. As Grissom's mistress, she was somewhat treated like property because she was only allowed to do certain things. She also got involved with Jack Napier and seemed to genuinely harbor feelings for him because she was constantly afraid of how Grissom would react to knowing about their affair. Despite her beauty, the movie portrayed her as extremely vain, as she had self-portraits everywhere in her apartment. After Grissom's death, when Napier took over his criminal empire, Alicia returned and nearly fainted on seeing her lover's now disfigured face. While Napier keeps her around, he disfigures her face using sulfuric acid, claiming that he was improving her, as he considered her to be a work of art. She would wear a porcelain mask from that point onwards and was referred to as the Joker's latest masterpiece when she was asked to take it off to show her face to Vicky Hale. Her death is never shown on screen, but it is strongly implied that she was killed by Napier because he said, quote, "You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs," end quote. His version of the events, however, stated that Alicia committed suicide by jumping out of a window, which is why the mask she used to wear got cracked. She may be a minor antagonist because she willingly associates with the mob and the Joker, but I feel that her story is more tragic as she is primarily a victim. It is never implied in the film, but her association with Grissom could absolutely have been the price he set to make her successful in the fashion world. And even though she cheated on him with Jack Napier after he disfigured her, she obviously acted out of fear and subservience instead of genuine loyalty towards him. Alicia Hunt was created specifically for the 1989 movie and does not exist in the DC Comics universe, but fans often consider her the spiritual predecessor to Harley Quinn, who was created later in 1992 for Batman the Animated Series. Like Harley, Alicia is also a blonde woman trapped in an abusive, obsessive relationship with the Joker. However, we do know that Alicia was based on Cersei, the ex-girlfriend of Black Mask, who was similarly disfigured with chemicals. In the Batman '89 comic book series, released in 2021, an account claimed that Alicia did not die and had appeared on live TV with Dr. Harleen Quinzel to talk about her relationship with the Joker. Sometime later, she had also unmasked herself to reveal that she had gone under the knife to heal her scarred face. Batman Returns, 1992. Max Schreck, corporate villain. Batman Returns is considered to be a blueprint for the later evolution of the superhero genre, and featured a villain who had no comic history. In the film, Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, is a regular white-collar criminal who intends to stockpile a significant amount of Gotham's energy reserves under his control. He teams up with the Penguin and becomes his primary benefactor, and is also the reason behind Selina Kyle's evolution into Catwoman. He was not based on any particular Batman villain and is largely underrated because he offers a much more realistic portrayal of an evil man. Schreck does not directly face Batman and prefers to work behind the scenes to incentivize the other villains to ultimately get what he wants. He does not have a unique villain-esque look or costume, and that is exactly why he represents the rot at the heart of the city, which cannot be touched by law enforcement or even the Caped Knight. He does not have a reason for turning evil, he simply is. Despite his actions, he does not appear to be bothered in the slightest. Max Schreck is glossed over by most fans, but to me, he is one of the most interesting and terrifying foes of Batman. Red Triangle Circus Gang, Penguin's Street Gang. This gang of ex-circus freaks was also an original element in the movie, but later found their way into the comics in Robin number 15. In Batman Returns, they were part of a popular circus group and eventually devolved into a gang, which was linked to numerous child kidnappings, with Penguin as their head. The comics said that they were then disbanded by the authorities, but re-emerged later, resulting in mass violence and chaos. While they did not seem to have any particular motive for their actions, fans have summarized that their reappearance was due to Joker's reign over Gotham. In their comic book debut, they looked like cheap imitations of the Joker himself, which was pointed out by Robin. The gang took offense at this because the Clown Prince was not a clown at all. Moreover, since he was missing for a while, they had taken it upon themselves to clown around in Gotham and make a name for themselves. Batman and Robin, 1997. Poison Ivy. Just to be clear, I am not saying that Poison Ivy was a hidden character in this film. I just feel that a lot more could have been done with her, especially when they got someone like Uma Thurman to play this iconic role. When the movie dropped, a lot of us were exhilarated because Poison Ivy is nothing short of absolutely stunning, and finally getting to see her in live-action form was something fans were really looking forward to. In the comics, she is not just your average run-of-the-mill villain. She is seductive, extremely smart, morally ambiguous, and very dangerous. The movie just focused on the seductive part and took liberties with all the other aspects of her character. Her flamboyance was well articulated, and the costume department did a fantastic job. But she was reduced to a secondary antagonist, which was really a pity, because Poison Ivy deserved her defining cinematic moment to be more than just an accessory. The script does not go very deep into the conflicts she creates, and simply does not address the fact that she was able to exploit Robin's weaknesses enough for him to turn against Batman, and writes it off as a silly love spell. In the comics, she was shown to be powerful enough to make Batman so infatuated with her that he was unable to fight crime properly due to the distraction, for God's sake. Not only does her intellect take a back seat, but even the one aspect that was heavily focused on, her seduction, does not look polished enough to be called deadly. It just feels playful, which is a massive discredit to the character. The idea of an ultimate femme fatale was only teased and never utilized fully. We were expecting fatal pheromones and mental manipulation, but the filmmakers handed us gag plants and flirtatious winks and called it a day. With a better script and a darker tone, Poison Ivy could have truly been portrayed as the enigma we read about in the comics. The casting was a brilliant job, no complaints on that, but that is also precisely why I feel this character was just wasted. If anyone could have brought her to life in the way we wanted to see, it would have been Thurman herself. Bane. Poison Ivy was not the only villain this movie did a disservice to. The version of Bane seen in Batman and Robin was just truly depressing. He was simply a thug in the service of Poison Ivy, without any personality of his own. The filmmakers did not even grant him the ability to speak properly, as throughout the film we mostly see him grunting and roaring to get his point across. He was muscular and extremely strong, but that is really not the point of his character. The devious, intelligent villain was reduced to a joke, and I don't think a single person appreciated that. It is one thing to depart from the comics, but this was a complete reduction of one of the most interesting opponents Batman has ever faced. People who have read the comics know exactly how terrifying and cunning he is, and he does not even add anything concrete to the movie's storyline. I have no idea what the filmmakers were even thinking, bringing a character like Bane into the mix and then just leaving him there to act as a pit bull bodyguard. If Ivy's portrayal was what stirred the discontent, Bane's role was the final nail in the coffin for the film's abysmal ratings. Batman Begins, 2005. Victor Zsasz. With Christopher Nolan at the helm, there is indeed very little I can point out as unsatisfactory for Batman Begins. But if I had to, the first thing would be the fact that Victor Zsasz was just shown to us for a few seconds and then poofed away. I remember watching the film and wondering why such an inherently terrifying character was barely given any screen time. In the comics, Zsasz is so much worse than a mob henchman. He is a psychopathic serial killer who brands himself with tally marks every time he kills someone and is diagnosed as clinically insane. He believes that killing people is his way of granting them salvation, but the movie never touches upon these subjects and makes it seem like he kills simply for mob money. We see him only twice, once at the courthouse, and then during the Arkham Asylum outbreak when he attacks Rachel and a young child before being stopped by Batman. The cameo feels very rushed, as if they just wanted fans to get hooked by using a famous name and slapping it on a generic criminal. The movie could have had a very interesting slasher angle if only Zsasz had been used beyond plot fodder. Henry Ducard. Certain liberties were definitely taken by Nolan for his version of Ra's al Ghul, and while Liam Neeson's performance was amazing, I still think about how much better or different the plot would have been if this villain were closer to his comic book counterpart. There, he is not a mentor to Batman, but rather one of his most powerful adversaries, who challenges Bruce Wayne's moral stand. Henry Ducard in the film starts as an intriguing character, but his reveal as the big bad feels more like a twist than a reveal, at least to me. Nolan definitely got his shock factor across with the decision, but he did use Ducard's comic book heritage as a plot device without giving the character the weight he deserved. Don't get me wrong, I loved Neeson's work, but I would have liked it even better if the leader of the League of Shadows was shown as a complex force of nature. Many fans believe that an extended arc showing Ducard/Ra's actively trying to corrupt Bruce's philosophy and getting close to succeeding would have made him genuinely terrifying. Ducard could have been given so much more to work with, which would have probably made the film an even bigger critical success. Ubu, homage. The character comic book fans know as Ubu does not directly appear in Batman Begins. The twist with Ken Watanabe's character, where we think he is the real Ra's al Ghul and only later discover he is only a decoy, is an intriguing narrative choice that forces fans to wonder about who this guy really was. Many fans have pointed out that this decoy role was an homage to Ubu, the League of Assassins enforcer, and Ra's loyal bodyguard. Nolan's choice turned him into a placeholder, which certainly fulfilled the suspense he was looking to achieve, but it still seems like a wasted chance. If the decoy figure was confirmed to have been Ubu, it would have also given a stronger foundation to Ducard's real identity.
Like a dog.
Carmine Falcone. This film was filled with very memorable villains, so Falcone often gets missed out, which is a pity because I think it was one of Tom Wilkinson's most impressive performances. Since then, we have seen numerous other actors play the role, and while they have all done a good job, Wilkinson was something else. In Batman Begins, Carmine Falcone starts as the unacknowledged ruler of Gotham's underworld, who becomes pivotal in setting the wheels in motion for Bruce Wayne's transformation into Batman. When Bruce faced Falcone for the first time, he was inexperienced and fueled by selfish rage instead of justice. Falcone had told him that he would never understand the mind of a criminal and would always be afraid of what he wanted to destroy, and this became the very mantra that drove Bruce to Ra's al Ghul's doorstep. Within the greater context of the film, this was a very small role, but without this man, Bruce would have remained lost, and Gotham would have stagnated even more. Tom Wilkinson did a hell of a job, giving the perfect mix of arrogance and gravitas to the role. Joe Chill. As we all know, this was the man responsible for the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne, which was witnessed by a young Bruce. After Chill was sentenced to prison, his cellmate was none other than Carmine Falcone. He testified against the latter to be released on parole, but his trial was made public on Falcone's insistence, which paved the way for his death. Chill had claimed that he was remorseful about his crime and had committed the murders out of desperation. However, as Falcone later told Bruce, the man never really regretted his actions and was simply putting up an act so he could be released from prison. Joe Chill had a small role in the film, but the impact of his crime was the very reason why Bruce Wayne became Batman. Detective Arnold Flass, corrupt GCPD detective. Arnold Flass was Jim Gordon's old partner, who represented the deep-rooted corruption within the GCPD. He moonlighted as a low-level enforcer for Falcone and notoriously stole from small businesses like food vendors and grocery store owners. He was caught by Batman once and asked about drugs, and was also released when he readily agreed to give information. He was finally infected with fear toxin and later incarcerated at Arkham Asylum. Harvey Dent also led an investigation where the corrupt detective's activities were made public, so he ended up being suspended and losing his disability pension. Once again, Flass was a minor villain in the movie, but an important one because he did not need to don any villain costume to carry out his misdeeds. He did all of that as a public servant, which showed the extent of corruption prevailing in Gotham at that time.
This man of your stature will understand.
I think, Mr. Fox, a simple phone call.
The Dark Knight, 2008. Lau, calculator-style nod. After watching the film for the first time, I had this itch in my brain because the criminal accountant Lau felt like a familiar character, but I just could not place him anywhere in the comic books. In the movie, he was returned by Batman to Gotham's police custody after having escaped to Hong Kong, and is largely believed to be Nolan's nod to the real comic villain, Calculator. This is all speculative, of course, but the theory keeps cropping up in discussions about how certain DC villains have never actually made live-action appearances, but have been teased via other characters. Lau is not exactly like the Calculator, because that would have been a dead giveaway. He is more of a mob accountant than a tech master, but the director has not exactly shied away from making subtle nods to comic book lore across the trilogy. There is always the question about how he could have made more use of Lau in true Calculator-esque fashion, but I think the indication was clever enough because it could have taken away focus from the Joker.
My baby! Did you miss me?
The Penguin. Fans have repeatedly pointed out that a character like the Penguin would have fit Nolan's grounded, noir take perfectly well. They have argued that it is odd that the director did not use him at all because he is among the few characters that reflect the movie's dark realism to a T. The Penguin does not appear in the Dark Knight trilogy at all, not officially at least. But I think there was a tiny little hint left by the Joker in The Dark Knight that counts as an unofficial inclusion. Remember when the Joker and his goons were robbing the Gotham National Bank and the manager tried to oppose them? Well, he was shot in the leg, but then our central antagonist said something quite odd to him.
Whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
I admit that I had missed this initially, but it does seem like a very subtle connection to the Penguin. If he were ever made into a central villain, I genuinely think he would have been truly Machiavellian and given strong competition to the Joker for the position of Batman's most iconic nemesis in the Nolanverse.
Sold! The man in the cold sweat.
Scarecrow, return cameo. He was introduced as a doctor conducting illegal experiments, much like the character in the comics. The fear gas, which Ra's al Ghul used to break into Gotham City, was enhanced by none other than him, and then Scarecrow was confronted by Batman. He made a cameo in The Dark Knight as a contraband peddler and was once again locked up. He returned in the third film too, in a similar role. And that's it. We never really saw what happened to him afterwards. When Bane and the League of Shadows were taken down, Scarecrow was left out of the picture. Fans presume that he was somehow nabbed by the police, but that is only an assumption since the movie did not tie up the loose ends. Scarecrow is a very dangerous villain to have on the loose. He could have been integrated into the League or maybe even murdered by Talia, as he was unable to finish her father's job, and either of these would have been a satisfying ending. After being set up as a criminal mastermind in the first movie, it was truly underwhelming that Nolan did nothing with the character, even when he had a powerhouse like Murphy portraying him. Sal Maroni. This Gotham mob boss who took over Carmine Falcone's empire was a very suave and confident criminal. He had sent one of his men to uncover Joker's identity, but this proved to be unsuccessful. Later, when he was being held by Batman off the side of a fire escape, he was arrogant enough to metaphorically laugh in Death's face by saying that the fall would not kill him. True to his prediction, he did not die, but broke both of his legs. Maroni was also a very intelligent man because he realized that he should be more afraid of the Joker than Batman, which is why he did not snitch on the Clown Prince. The movie does not explicitly show his death and leaves it open to interpretation. However, since his seatbelt was unfastened, it does not appear that he survived. The irony of his death was not lost to us because while Harvey Dent had tried very hard to put Maroni behind bars as a DA, he killed him quite easily as Two-Face. Moreover, Harvey would never have turned into Two-Face if Joker had not been hired by the mob bosses, so in a way it was pure karma for Maroni. The Chechen, mob lieutenant. Initially, the Chechen was a drug trafficker who worked with Scarecrow, but had managed to escape Batman out of sheer luck. When he later allied with Gambol and Sal Maroni, he was the one who was the most interested in the Joker's proposition to the mob. Maroni had hired Joker on the Chechen's advice. Unfortunately for him, his demise came at the hands of Joker too, when he claimed that his underlings would never work for a freak. The Chechen's own men dragged him away to execute Joker's orders of cutting him into pieces and feeding those to his Rottweilers. His real name is never revealed in the movies, but he is similar to Yuri Dimitrov from Nolan's franchise. We don't really see this guy a lot on screen, but he serves to highlight just how ruthless the Joker could be, despite his usual theatrics.
Reason why I shouldn't have my boy here pull your head off.
How about a magic trick?
Gambol, mobster. He was a rival mob boss to Maroni and the Chechen, but had entered into a lukewarm truce with them when Batman cracked down on mob activities in Gotham. He was suspicious of the Joker from the very beginning and was vehemently against taking his help. He had to reluctantly let the villain go, but not before having placed a bounty on his head so he could be brought back to learn some manners. Some bounty hunters even managed to bring Joker to him as a ruse, but the latter revealed himself and took a knife to Gambol's face. After talking about how he got his scars, Joker killed the mob boss with the same knife. However, actor Michael Jai White later revealed that Gambol had a bigger role initially, and instead of having killed him right away, the Joker had carved a smile onto his face similar to his own. These scenes were cut by Nolan after Heath Ledger's death for unknown reasons. The Dark Knight Rises, 2012. John Daggett. Bruce Wayne's rival socialite, John Daggett, in the movie is heavily modeled after Roland Daggett from Batman the Animated Series, where the latter is depicted as a ruthless and greedy corporate figure, often called Gotham's Lex Luthor. John Daggett is not exactly villainous in a psychopathic, Clayface-creating way, but he clearly displays Roland's lust for power by taking over Wayne Enterprises and even aiding Bane's plan by facilitating the theft of Bruce's fingerprints to oust him from his own company. Many fans think that, despite the lack of official recognition, John could be Roland's son or successor in the Nolanverse. His role in the movie is also more of a plot device, as Bane kills him once he has no use for him anymore. In the animated series, Roland plays a decisive role, as his actions not only lead to the creation of Clayface, but he also manages to nearly kill Selina Kyle by infecting her with a disease for which he had the antidote.
Matt! Oh, Matt, is that you? What in heaven's...
Clayface. Considering how Roland Daggett inspired an original character in The Dark Knight Rises, it can be assumed that this connection was also Nolan's acknowledgement of Clayface as a villain. In the animated series, Matt Hagen was introduced as an actor whose face became heavily disfigured after an accident. He agreed to work for Roland in exchange for being given a compound called Renew You, which promised to return his youthful looks. However, when he tried to double-cross Roland, an entire canister of the compound was poured on him. It did not kill him but transformed him into a bulky, clay-like form with the ability to shapeshift into anyone he wanted for a brief time. Since the Daggett name is so specifically tied to Clayface's animated origins, the film's version suggests that Clayface might exist somewhere in the background of Nolan's Batverse. Killer Croc. I had completely missed this reference the first time I watched The Dark Knight Rises. Remember how John Blake told Bruce Wayne that the Gotham PD did not believe that the sewers running under the city could be problematic hideouts? He then spoke about giant alligators, which initially seemed like a throwaway gag. When I rewatched it, I was almost angry at how I missed this very specific nod to none other than Killer Croc. We have no official confirmation, but I think this was quite deliberate on Nolan's end, and he acknowledged the villain's existence without actually showing him on screen. The producers of Batman Gotham Knight have mentioned how it is canon to the Dark Knight trilogy, and there we see Killer Croc making an appearance. In fact, fans have said that when it was screened early for Nolan to watch, he had asked the filmmakers to remove Killer Croc's tail. Speaking of John Blake, there is also the famous reference to his first name being Robin, which we see towards the end of the film. Easter eggs galore, don't you think? Mr. Freeze. This might be an overreach, but I think Mr. Freeze was also referenced in this movie. When Gotham is under siege by Bane and cut off from the rest of the world, remember how the Scarecrow was punishing people by sending them to their deaths on Gotham's frozen river? Maybe this was Nolan's way of introducing Victor Freeze in the trilogy without actually portraying him anywhere. Other than this speculative role, the only other time we have seen this villain was during Batman and Robin, when he was portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. That is a famously awful movie, as I discussed just a while back, so it is possible that Nolan was teasing the idea of Mr. Freeze looming beneath the surface of the river. Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, 2016. KG Beast, Anatoly Kniazev. If you know DC lore, this is not just a random name. Anatoly Kniazev is the real name of KG Beast, one of Batman's most popular comic foes and a ruthless KGB assassin. Within the organization, he was known as the Beast, while the KG Beast moniker was given to him by the CIA. He was cybernetically enhanced to be extremely powerful and knew how to wield every weapon known to man. In the movie itself, Kniazev is never called KG Beast and is only referred to as the Russian. He also lacks the cybernetic arm that defines him in the comics. Instead, he just comes off as an arms smuggler and henchman for Lex Luthor. Snyder used his comic name but did not lean into his comic origin, which does seem like a lost opportunity. Early production rumors and fan discussions also noted how KG Beast was supposed to be a future Suicide Squad entry, or part of an extended DCEU story, but this ultimately did not happen. It would have been very satisfying to have seen a brutal KG Beast in action instead of just a background mercenary. Off-screen Riddler. Fans were very quick to notice how a particular scene in the film indicated the presence of the Riddler, one of the Dark Knight's most prolific opponents. The Wayne Manor shown in this film was run down and picked apart by indiscriminate plant growth and graffiti on its walls. While only a few frames are clearly seen, one in particular showed a familiar question mark spray painted on one of the columns of the mansion. This indicates that the Riddler might have visited Batman's childhood home and also knew the Masked Crusader's real identity, which is a theme that is never explored in the movie. I get that the name of the film itself was self-explanatory enough, so these other subplots were not really given any focus, but the very idea of having the Riddler back on the big screen makes me excited beyond measure. Jim Carrey definitely did do justice to the role back in Batman Forever. Who do you think can play this character among the current A-listers in Hollywood? Firefly. In DC Comics, Firefly, also known as Garfield Lynns, is a terrifying pyromaniac villain. An expert in fire and explosives, he is always seen with a flamethrower and a jetpack-equipped suit. You must be wondering how this relates to Batman v Superman at Dawn of Justice. The answer lies in a prequel comic tied to the movie, which actually introduces Firefly and confirms him as part of the same continuity, even if he does not appear anywhere in the live-action film. This comic was released exclusively by Dr. Pepper, written by Christos Gage, and drawn by Joe Bennett, so this is certainly an overreach, but it does establish Firefly as a hidden villain in the movie. Nairobi's Warlord/Dictator, desert incident used to frame Superman. General Amajaj was a warlord from Nairobi, a sub-Saharan area in Africa, and was used by Lex Luthor to implicate Superman in an international incident. When Lois Lane went to interview him, her photographer was outed as an undercover CIA agent and killed. However, she was completely oblivious to his real identity, but Amajaj still refused to let her leave, which forced Superman to arrive on the scene to rescue her. Superman killed him, but his men were murdered by none other than Anatoly Knyazev, who was under orders from Luthor to make it appear as if Superman was behind the massacre. Suicide Squad 2016. Deadshot. Deadshot in Suicide Squad is one of the few character performances most fans genuinely remember, not just because Will Smith brought him to life, but because the film gave us hints of a conflicted assassin rather than the sarcastic marksman we saw on screen. He only agreed to work for Amanda Waller if his daughter Zoe's education would be funded, with him being allowed to spend more time with her. He has a strict moral code he sticks to, come hell or high water, as he refuses to kill women and children. In fact, when he was promised the chance of a permanent reunion with Zoe and complete freedom for himself in exchange for killing Harley Quinn, he chose not to take it despite feeling tempted. And while this was an interesting portrayal, it did feel watered down compared to Deadshot's comic identity. There is a reason why he is a villain, I mean. The movie showed him as kind of an anti-hero with a heart of gold, which might have worked for its setting but does not do justice to his comic counterpart, as he does take pleasure and thrill in hunting down his targets. Killer Croc. After being teased in The Dark Knight Rises, Killer Croc made his live-action appearance with Suicide Squad. On screen, Waylon Jones is introduced as a hulking reptilian metahuman imprisoned in Belle Reve and recruited by Amanda Waller for his brute strength and terrifying presence. The film could have done a lot more with him because in the end he just remains the scary guy. The design choice also felt quite questionable to me because he ended up looking more like a man with a bad skin condition instead of the fully evolved reptilian features that fans know from the comics. If nothing else, he could have at least been made to look more terrifying. Croc has a rich but extremely disheartening history, so the film could have explored his backstory in a way that would have made him more than just the team's muscle. This portrayal was also subject to controversy due to racist elements incorporated into the writing and direction of the film. Penguin. File reference. The Penguin isn't mentioned by name in Suicide Squad, but many fans believe that there is reasonable proof to believe that he could have been one of the names in Amanda Waller's files. Oswald Cobblepot is a mastermind crime boss who runs syndicates and black markets and has complex intel networks under his control. Naturally, Waller having information on Gotham's criminal elite feels like a deliberate hint that Penguin exists in this universe, and if that is true, he is obviously significant enough to be cataloged. So while the film never shows Cobblepot or mentions his name, it is only logical to conclude that the Penguin is one of the characters Waller had been tracking. Justice League / Zack Snyder's Justice League 2017/2021. Deathstroke. Slade Wilson, played by Joe Manganiello, only appears in a tiny post-credits scene where he meets Lex Luthor, as the latter pitches the idea of a League of Our Own to oppose the Justice League. His history in the Snyderverse is not very clearly mentioned, as one account states that he might have already encountered Batman before meeting with Luthor. According to the director's cut, Luthor had also revealed the Dark Knight's identity to Deathstroke. In the Nightmare timeline, Deathstroke was a member of a resistance movement led by Batman and had announced his reluctance to their recruiting the Joker to build a device that could send the Flash back in time. He was supposed to be the main antagonist in Ben Affleck's The Batman film, but this never materialized. I must say that I was looking forward to seeing Deathstroke in live-action format, beyond a few seconds, that is. However, it does not seem like this is going to happen anytime soon. Desaad, Apocalypse Lieutenant. Desaad is a new god who is very loyal to Darkseid and assisted Steppenwolf in his invasion of the Earth in 2017. In the comics, he is Darkseid's chief scientist, right hand, and torturer. His role in the film is extremely brief, and it almost feels like he was included just for the sake of it. A character like him with a rich comic history deserved a little more screen time. He is a core villain in the Fourth World mythos, who has routinely taken a stand against Superman and Shazam. Granny Goodness, Apocalypse Elite, who appears briefly. Another character who appears on screen for just a few seconds is Granny Goodness, who was accompanying Darkseid and Desaad to head to Earth and witness the formation of the Unity. She later witnessed Steppenwolf's defeat at the hands of the Justice League and his eventual killing by Darkseid. This character has appeared in many DC animated shows in the past. Superman, nightmare/corrupted or controlled, future timeline threat. The Nightmare timeline is one of the most captivating storylines from the Snyderverse. It is set as a direct consequence of the events of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, where Superman's death had created a ripple effect. This created a world where Superman became a tyrant and ruled over the Earth with an iron fist. The exact reason for his moral degeneration is not explained, but fans have assumed that it had something to do with the death of Lois Lane. As she was his anchor to humanity, her death paved the way for his corruption. The anti-life equation, which fell into Darkseid's hands, was the very thing that caused this corruption. We see this in detail only in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and even today, fans agree that it was a very ambitious and interesting take on the DC Universe. Joker, Nightmare Timeline appearance. Speaking of the Nightmare Timeline, one of the most interesting things we witnessed was certainly the appearance of Joker in the epilogue. To be honest, this does not really add anything to the story as such, and it is believed that this scene was included because the director simply wanted a Batman-Joker scene in this universe. In that scene, we witnessed these two characters joining forces almost reluctantly, but it almost echoed the possible fates of two other characters. When Joker says, "I'm happy to discuss in any way you like why you sent a boy wonder to do a man's job," and Robin's vandalized suit is seen in the Batcave, the only logical explanation is that he had died. Moreover, Harley Quinn's death is also implied, which seems to be a sore spot for the Clown Prince. Had Snyder not parted ways with the DCEU, we would have probably seen a sequel where Batman's new group would have traveled back in time to undo the death of Lois Lane and prevent the Nightmare timeline from happening. Birds of Prey, 2020, Black Mask. Black Mask is not exactly a hidden villain in this film, considering how he is the main antagonist. As one of the most iconic crime lords of Gotham, his portrayal by Ewan McGregor was a real visual treat. The only complaint I have is about how this character was reshaped to fit Birds of Prey's broader themes of misogyny and empowerment. That was not a bad idea in itself, of course, and it gave the plot enough weight, but it meant his crime lord persona was sidelined to an extent. I also think that having a dramatic transformation like in the comics where his mask was fused to his face would have worked better for cinematic effect. Moreover, he was killed off too quickly, so it did not have that satisfying feel to it. If his character had been explored beyond just being a catalyst for Harley Quinn's growth, it would have definitely added more substance to the movie. The Batman, 2022. Hush, Tommy Elliott tease. In this movie, you could see a blink-and-you-miss-it moment during the Riddler's clues that teases a popular Batman villain. Before the Thomas Wayne footage is shown, the reporter investigating the Waynes is named Edward Elliot, and in one of the Riddler's videos, the word "Hush" flashes across the screen. In the comics, Hush is a villain working with the Riddler and is none other than Bruce's childhood friend Tommy Elliott. Despite being his friend, Tommy harbored a grudge against both Bruce and the Waynes because his plan to kill his parents for good had failed partly due to Thomas Wayne's surgical skills. Naturally, fans are wondering if he will show up in the sequel to The Batman, as this was not a subtle hint at all. Court of Owls. The Court of Owls is a secret criminal society made up of the wealthiest and most influential citizens of Gotham, which has existed since the city was founded. Most people believe it to be an urban legend. While the group has not appeared in any live-action film yet, it was the main antagonist in the CW series Gotham Knights. In The Batman, one of the greeting cards left by the Riddler features an owl at the front. It might seem like a completely unrelated image, but considering how the symbol of the Court of Owls is an owl, it could be a spoiler for the next film. And this might be a stretch, but the underlying bird motifs throughout the story, falcon, penguin, could point to some kind of avian symbolism regarding the hidden powers controlling the city. Joker. I think almost all of us got this right. The unnamed criminal incarcerated at Arkham State Hospital is none other than the Joker. After being captured, the Riddler was placed in the adjacent cell, and the two villains shared a short conversation. A deleted scene from the movie showed Batman visiting the Joker after the death of Commissioner Savage to create a psychological profile of the Riddler. Director Matt Reeves did not include this scene because he felt that it contained information that was relayed gradually over the course of the film and would have spoiled many other scenes had it been included. Barry Keoghan is set to reprise this role in the sequel, but it is not known whether he will be the central antagonist. The Twins, Iceberg Lounge Doorman. The twins guarding the Iceberg Lounge initially seem like usual mob henchmen protecting the criminal club and executing bouncer-like duties so that only the right kind of criminals would get inside. However, if you look closely, you will uncover one of the most obscure references throughout the movie. Remember how in Batman the Animated Series, the goons of all the main villains had their specific gimmicks? Joker's henchmen were all dressed like clowns, and Two-Face's sidekicks had outfits that split down the middle. Min and Max were twin brothers on Two-Face's task force, and I found the twins guarding the Iceberg Lounge to be oddly similar to these two characters. But if they really were intended to be shown as Two-Face's men, it naturally begs the question of why they were working for the Penguin. Some fans have alluded to this reference to mean that Two-Face might be revealed as a potential villain in the sequels. From underutilized characters like Bane in Batman and Robin to hinted ones like Riddler in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, villains from DC have popped up across different movies in varying capacities. The list mentioned here contains critically acclaimed works like the Dark Knight trilogy, as well as poorly executed ones like Birds of Prey. All these movies have consistently been playing a long game with their villains. With hidden figures lurking in graffiti, news reports, or throwaway lines, the real implication here is that for every criminal Batman defeats, another pops out. The Caped Crusaders' war on crime is truly endless in that sense. So, the next time you watch one of these films, make sure to focus beyond the villain monologuing in the spotlight.